All right. Good morning, family, and welcome to Documenting Dreams. My name is Jenelle Hanes, your principal owner of Just B LLC, and it is my pleasure to be before you with a very special guest. As you know, all of my guests are very special, extra special, to be honest, in my book. But this guest is someone that I truly appreciate. As he says, he is a bridge builder. I can definitely attest to that being something or a word that describes him. So his name is Chuck Meadows. And I just want Chuck to share a little bit about his story, how he came to be this bridge builder, this innovator, an advocate, and one who I often say he considers the least of these first. And so, Chuck, if you had to give us your elevator speech, what would it be?
Yeah, so my elevator speech is, a guy who grew up exposed right to the need for bridges to be built. I guess I would say at a very early age. So I grew up in Washington Park, which was not so great neighborhood, but to parents who were doing very well and understood the value of education and who pushed me. And that push, that upbringing in a neighborhood that where people were suffering, but to parents that were pushing, really made me who I am, right? And so you see problems and you're in a position to solve them, so solve them. And that's pretty much what I've been doing my entire career.
Nice. So, that I believe where you grew up is a part of your story. And if you were getting ready to tell your story, would you start there or would you start somewhere else? And who do you think would tell it or should tell your story?
That's an interesting one. So yeah, I mean, I do think that my story begins well, I guess when I was born, but 1981, we moved from, so kind of the suburbs in South Metro Atlanta into historic Washington Park, which is a neighborhood that my father grew up in. And so it definitely starts there. I mean, my story may have to be narrated by a few people because there was no one there that was present for the whole time. And that's a part of what I think has made me as well. Lots of different influences and mentors and supporters throughout my life. And so it would be difficult to pick one person to tell that entire story because there are some people who weren't around for some of those chapters.
Right. That's so great that you pointed it out because when you think about the documentaries that we watch, this is one of my favorite things to do or favorite pastimes, if you will. And there are certain people that are in that starting lineup, as we call it, right? I have my elite eight and some people have their starting five or their best six man. So if you had to describe those people, and you don't have to name them, but maybe describe some of those attributes, who would they be? And, what are the things that they do to maybe hold you accountable or just, keep you grounded?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think I learned that lesson later in life, like how impactful that starting five of that lineup can be, just in terms of your trajectory. And so there's some people that I feel hold very valuable positions in my life now, who came into my life a little bit later along the line, which is fine. But I think that's part of how the story was written as well. And so yeah, I mean, I've got a core group of folks, some of whom you might know or be very very familiar with, that push me in different ways. And I think there are individuals who I continue to be impressed and amazed by their opinion of me. It's kind of like, really, you think that I am this person? And so that challenges me to live up to that perception, right? If I notice that and appreciate that, and I know that it's connected to something, then that instills a drive in me to make sure that I'm living up to that standard. And that's been, very helpful along the way. And I have others who remind me to take a step back, to relax, and I think to not let the ambition become consuming, right? Sometimes you're pushing so much and pushing so hard that you can forget to regenerate, forget to restore, forget to practice good self-care. And that's a healthy and important reminder as well. So yeah, I've really been pleased at the way folks come together, and some of these individuals know each other, and some of them don't. But they play different roles in helping me stay on track, and not just on track, but helping me continue to excel and grow.
Yeah. So do they attribute to your personal mission? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, so I would say absolutely. So my personal mission, I think, is a little bit, well, one of the things I've been pleased with and fond of in my career. Like, my life mission has always been wrapped up in what I'm doing every day for work, right? And that, to me, I have appreciated that responsibility, or that opportunity to go to work every day and push for things that I believe in, right? And so my personal mission is very much reflected in my career, and that's just to make an impact, to make a difference. And so, growing up in Washington Park and seeing, families suffering from generational poverty, to watching folks, suffer from a lack of opportunity, economic, educational, otherwise. From walking past, rundown homes or abandoned buildings, and seeing the way crime sort of victimizes individuals who don't have different opportunities. And so, growing up there made me want to do something that improved things for not just folks in Washington Park, but people in that, kind of like you said, at the top, the least of these. And so, how do I get a seat at the table, or at least close enough to the table, where I can have an influence in some capacity, right? That in a way that is going to make things better, increase opportunity, hopefully decrease inequity. Right. And that is my personal mission. I always want to have, whatever I'm doing, I always want that to have an impact. And I've been thankful for, like I said, the opportunity to do that throughout my career, and then add additional, volunteer opportunities and engagements to support that as well.
Nice. That's wow. Every time I listen to you speak, I'm amazed at just I'm amazed at your ambition to create this space for people who would either least expect it or are least expected to do, some great things. And I think that part of that, you talked about being, you didn't say overly ambitious, but your ambition sometimes you get very passionate, and then, sometimes either people can misunderstand it or feel like, okay, bring it back a little bit or whatever. Talk about how that level of ambition, cause people to maybe distort what you were really trying to do, or get confused about what you really want to have happen, and how you grew from that.
That's a great question. One of the sayings I sort of lean back on is, it's not enough just to be right. It's not enough to do the right thing. It's not good enough to be right. You can have the best motives and and most well-intentioned and the best intentions. But people do need to understand where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that there are folks who may look back across what I've done, or look at my resume and say, okay, well, that's someone who's trying to climb the ladder. He's trying to get somewhere. He's trying to, and not necessarily see, what I think my own personal mission is. And so a big part of that is, in each step of the way, being clear with people why you're doing what it is you want to do. Mm-hmm. And how that drive connects with them, right? The sort of the what's in it for them. Mm-hmm. And that is the challenge in each individual action, making sure that those that you are working with and working around understand the goal, and understand how that goal relates to them. And so what you are explaining to them may not be your total motivation, right? It may not be the entire picture, but giving them the piece of the picture that means the most to them, and helping them understand why they should be involved. I've learned that very often that can motivate folks to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do. And by that, I mean, someone may not see a reason why they should be involved in resolving a particular inequity. But if you tell them how that the outcome would impact them as well and how it benefits them as well, then they come along. And I'll take that. I mean, I think overall you want people to be motivated by the greater good, but the fact of the matter is that isn't the case all the time. And so if they're not bought into the greater good, understanding how it impacts them will help them, will help bring them along, right? And help hopefully bring them towards the cause.
Yeah, and I think that requires people believing in you, or, first the belief, you have to start somewhere with the thought or the vision or whatever, but and believing in yourself. But I think even the icing on top, or the cherry on top, if you will, is somebody believing in you. And so, that leads me to the next question is, who believes in you the most?
That's a tough one. I think that so my mother comes immediately to mind. I think, and both my parents. I shouldn't leave them out. You asked for one individual. They kind of come as a package.
Right. Yeah.
I do get a sense from them, and I always have, right, that when I accomplish something, whatever that is, if it's getting into a particular school or landing a particular job or whatever the case may be, they are always pleased but not surprised. Right. By that I mean they share in the celebration, they share in that joy. But there's always a sense of, we knew that you were going to do these types of things. And while that sounds, that sounds like it may be a little bit frustrating, it's a strong reminder, right? We have as your parents helped make sure that you had access to these opportunities, and we're pleased that you're taking advantage of them and doing what and making things happen, using them as opportunities to make things happen. But there's nothing surprising about it, and that's a strong reminder that to whom much is given, a lot is expected, and living up to that is important.
For sure. And it's funny, I listened to you, and the thing that stood out to me the most is you said believe but not surprised. And that struck me, because when I tell people about some of the things that I'm doing, have done, and I want to do, and then they see them happen, they're like, Jenelle, that's great. But I have to say I'm not surprised. And it's always like, well, dang, like that was kind of the goal, to like come to you with this big thing, and you'd be like, man, that's awesome. But to your point, like, it's more of an affirmation and confirmation for those that do believe in you, right?
That's right.
We saw it all the time. We knew that this thing was in you, and we were waiting for you to do the thing, and show us. And, and I think it's really, instead of that feeling like, man, dang, I didn't surprise them, it's like, oh no, I actually made them feel good about what they were believing in, the investment that they had, if that person is your parent or whoever it is, to come back and say, hey, I did this thing, and you were the person that were believing in me for it happening.
Exactly.
And it's happening. So I love the way that you said that. Every time I interview someone, there is a theme or resounding message that comes out of it. And several of them come up, but the one that's sticking with me right now and is resonating, I just have to say it out loud, is believe but not surprised. And so I just thank you for saying that. I get humble every time I interview someone, and those friendly reminders, and that was one of them. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So we kind of talked about this, and maybe there's another word, but if you had to take another word outside of the two words of bridge builder, what's one word to describe you?
Yeah. So servant leader is one that's always stuck with me. So, obviously I didn't coin the phrase, but you go through different professional development and leadership coaching opportunities along the course of your career, and servant leadership is one of those concepts that was introduced to me sort of early on. And it to this day, I think it's still a powerful and impactful word to anyone who considers themselves a leader. And so putting that term servant next to leader reminds you always that if you are in a leadership position, there are people who you are serving. And service, positioning it that way is important, because you are serving them whether they know it or not, right? And so it's not a situation where you're delivering something that they have requested or even have demanded. It's serving right, constituencies in an impactful and a powerful way, whoever those constituencies are made up of. And so that I always strive to be a servant leader, the type of leader who, even if no one is looking, I am going to make sure I'm operating in the best interests of those with needs, that need to be met. And it reminds you to stay humble, right? I think a lot of times, and leadership positions can come along with lofty titles and different types of recognition. And I think it can be easy to lose track of why you are there in the first place. And so being a servant leader always reminds you that there are folks who are relying on you. You have a duty that you're obligated to fulfill, and that's the most important part versus being celebrated or being recognized or throwing your title around.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like, as a servant leader, that means you're willing to go the second mile, right?
Absolutely.
And that's,
or the fourth or the fifth or whatever.
The fourth or the fifth. And I'm not just walking with you, but I'm doing the work with you, right? I'm sharing the load and I'm sharing the burden. And I love the title servant leader. To your point, there are times when we are doing some work and neither person knows the benefit, but it feels good to have somebody that is in a role to lead and guide you to doing that work alongside of you. And, you both later on can look back and see the benefit. You also have to be willing to make some hard decisions. And so I'm just curious about, it could be personal or professional. What is one of the hardest decisions you've had to make and who did it impact the most?
Wow. I would say, it was a turning point in my career. And I think back to, so I left the Metro Atlanta Chamber. I was vice president of public policy there, and working to figure out what to do next. And the two opportunities I had, one was was to become the executive director of the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. And the other was I actually identified an investor who was willing to fund a business plan for Jim Adams, right? And so Jim Adams was and is, right, still a sort of family driven business concept that links food and farming, right? And so both, sort of capitalizing on natural farming and creating a business model that delivers that fresh grown produce directly to consumers, right? Both to purchase the produce itself, but also to purchase finished foods, right? So prepared foods. So at this point, I'd been recruited and was offered the position at the Beltline Partnership, and I also had this investor who was ready to move forward with my Jim Adams, my business model for Jim Adams at the time. And I couldn't do both, right? That wasn't an option. So ambitious people can sometimes be ambitious and like they can do it all. But it wasn't a situation where I could do both. And so I had to decide between taking this role at an organization that I had a high level of respect for, incredible opportunity to work for one of the biggest urban redevelopment projects in the nation, or sort of fulfill this dream of delivering fresh and healthy food and building on family history of farming. And I chose to go work for the Beltline and to put Jim Adams on hold. And that was hard because it was the first time I really faced that fork in the road as far as that type of fork in the road as far as my career was concerned. And choosing between two very different. Actually, the opportunities it's hard for them to be more different, right? One of them is to work for an established organization with lots of partners on the local, state, and regional level. The other was to, go off of my own, work for myself, and grow this family business. And so it comes to mind because of the way things turned out. So when I took the job at the Beltline, I was working on had a draft lease on some property where we were going to build some raised beds and some greenhouses. And property also included several thousand square feet of space to build out a restaurant and a farmer's market. It was actually on the Beltline, on the West Side Beltline Trail. And so I had to walk away from that opportunity to take an opportunity to work on, the broader Beltline project. The Beltline experience ended up it didn't end well. I'll put it that way, and that can be a topic for maybe episode 26.
Another show.
Yeah, another show. But it didn't end well. But I learned a lot. Right. The connections I was able to make, the exposure, the understanding of some of the challenges around the Beltline, specifically in neighborhoods that suffer from disinvestment, like Washington Park, where I grew up, right? And so the insight it allowed me to gain, the conversations I was able to have, and even the way that I exited the project, it was a very tough and probably couple of the most challenging years in my career. But it was also a period where I grew the most. And after spending some time there, was still able to get Jim Adams off the ground a couple of years later in a different but still great neighborhood. And so the reason why that sticks out to me as the toughest decision, but also the one that I grew, the most from, is because, the understanding that one, there are always going to be things that are out of your control, right? And so no matter how much you deliberate, how much thought you put into a decision, it's equally, if not more so, about how you navigate the different things that come out of having made that decision, right? And how you respond to those unexpected things. And so it was definitely the hardest decision I made. I still continue to learn from it, in that it would be easy to go back and say, well, I never should have gone and worked for the Beltline. I should have just, launched my own business then and started from there, and who knows what could have happened. But I would not have had that opportunity to learn and see and experience and connect and relate in the ways that time at the Beltline allowed me to do. And in many ways, it better positioned me to launch the business and continues to yield a lot in terms of just the lessons and the connections that were built. I think I was able to take a stand at the Beltline that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to take otherwise. Other folks saw me take that stand, and I think that it ended up developing a lot of allies and very beneficial relationships that grew out of that experience.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Those experiences are very important. And it makes me think of a quote, and I'm curious about what you think about, or what comes up for you when you hear this quote. All information is good information, right? So what do you think about when you hear, that statement or that quote?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. I definitely think it's true. The more you can learn, the better, right? Even if the learning hurts. I think that also extends to my, I also believe, and it's sort of an extension of that quote, there is something to be learned from every individual, right? So every person that you come in contact with, there is an opportunity to learn something from that person. It doesn't matter who they are, or what they've seen. I mean, and that is that's the beauty of just humans interacting. There's always something to be learned, and so yes, I agree that the more you learn, the more information you gather, the more informed your perspective becomes, especially if you're processing and applying that information as you take it in. I definitely think that's absolutely true.
For sure. And so, in life we have these times when it becomes difficult, or we have a setback, or, we have to make a hard decision. What is one of the ways, one of my previous guests used the word, I recalibrate. How do you recalibrate or reset?
Yeah. I am learning to look at everything as a gift or an opportunity. Every experience, no matter how you may characterize it as you're going through it, but every experience is a gift and opportunity. So, I take an assessment, like what is it that I am to have learned from this experience that I had. And what do I have now that I didn't have before, right? And that assessment, that inventory is very important. And obviously, when we take that inventory, we're not talking about necessarily physical things,
right?
But how is my stamina or patience or endurance increased? How have my relationships grown? How has my insight or perspective expanded? What do I know how to respond to now that I didn't know how to respond to before, right? So taking that assessment, that personal inventory, you're always going to find something that you gain. You're going to find something that you have now that you didn't have before you went through that. It's just a matter of taking that very deliberate perspective to take stock and take inventory. Otherwise, we're saying, I wasted time there, right? I could have been doing this. I should have been doing that. And that you will always find fuel for that fire as well. And it can become consuming. If you're looking at things with that negative perspective, you will find negative things to stack on top of each other in terms of reasons why it wasn't a good experience. But if you're looking to take that personal inventory of how I am better, right? How my position has been improved through that experience, you're also going to find a lot of ways that you grew.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you think about, your memories and specifically your childhood memories, what is your first and best childhood memory?
Oh, wow.